development. We have a couple small action items at the end of the meeting. So welcome to this meeting, and please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I look over the audience and under the announcement piece, and I'd ask the superintendent if when his comments, if he would just comment a little bit about the SAVE committee and about some of the things that we've got going. This will be an ongoing discussion, but I think you're going to be talking
preaching to the choir.
Preaching to the choir. But some of us are interested in this. We all interested in it, and just getting an update, keeping that on track. So could I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Deanna, second. Bob. Any questions or comments? All those in favor? Move forward on that. I do want to note that our Vice President Todd Gilbert had the misfortune of having to travel to New York City today by train, and we're not sure where that train is coming back, but he had anticipated it would be goofed up, and then when he started hearing the weather report, he assumed he wouldn't be here tonight, so I'll mention that. And we're joined by our student representative, Bargaby. Again, thank you. I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Good. So before we get into the budget, as Mr. Casey pointed out, we've been discussing school safety, particularly in light of some recent events. So a couple of things. We had a SAVE committee meeting, I think I mentioned before. At least we have Mr. DeLallo and Mr. Gilbert on that. And we really had a great conversation, particularly about law enforcement engagement with the school. We have a solid partnership with the Saratoga County Sheriff Department. We will be back engaged in the New York State Police much more than in the past, but certainly right now Saratoga County is committed to even as a part of their budget planning process, thinking about increased law enforcement presence. So we're going to be having an ongoing conversation with Zerlo on that. Probably a new dimension that we're in the process of planning for right now. And this actually came out of some of the conversations that we had at the last SAVE meeting, was to try to get what I call a select group of true experts to be in a space. So our SAVE committee right now, probably 25, a large group of people. And people that are representing different constituency groups, which is great because we get a different perspective. But we want to have a smaller group and hone it down to some folks that we want to bring, some experts. So we're in the process now of inviting everyone, for example, representatives from FBI, because FBI had a huge role in the Parkland stuff, the Homeland Security, Saratoga County Emergency Management, New York State Police, Sheriff Department. Clearly, certain members of the SAVE committee we'll have on there because we have some internal folks that we need to have in a conversation. And a part of that is to really just get the best minds, if you will, in the room for a couple hours and just brainstorm ideas, just put stuff out there to talk about things, and then come up with a handful. And I say handful not because we want to get a handful of things that we can really assess and really do very well beyond what we're already doing. Because sometimes when you have a laundry list of things to do, you don't do any of them very well. And so we really want to come down and hone, and we're going to force the group to think about it. And if we come up with 10 things, what are the top 5 that we should be doing, and what's some time frames to get some of those kind of things done? So some things will be publicly revealed, some things won't be because of the nature of safety and some of the things that we do. So a lot of good conversation surrounding that, even related to that, a lot of good conversation that our students are having in terms of them understanding their role and responsibility when it comes to safe, being a safe school. And so Mr. Agustinoni and the middle school administration have been having conversation with students. And so we're pleased that more and more people are realizing that they can have an impact on the safety of our schools. And so even the board public forum is going to be another opportunity again to engage the public in a meaningful way of some things that we do. This graphic is going to be a part of that discussion because it's outlined a lot of things that we're doing now, and we're cleaning up, and at some point we'll be posting it so people, the things that we can post, so to speak, on this piece of. So school safety is not a political issue for us, nor is it a popular issue for us. It's a very practical issue. And I say that because we have a lot of popular ideas, versus what are the practical, long-term, sustainable ideas, and that's really our focus as we move forward with the school safety piece. If there are any additional
Any
follow-up.
questions or comments? No? Thank you.
So that's great. So I'll transition to the budget piece, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So tonight, I'm going to tee up the budget a little bit. At some point, Mrs. Retmore will come in quite a bit. Dr. Wood will also come in to try to provide some backdrop on some of our instructional pieces. When we get into the transportation pieces, Mr. Karen would come forward and outline some of the budget proposal pieces. You have the document in front of you, so hopefully you're familiar with it. But what we're going to try to do is provide some inside knowledge, if you will, beyond what you just read on the paper, so you can have a greater perspective on what's the thinking behind some of the things that we're looking to do.
So let me just, for new people and not so new people. So in terms of process, we're seeing these numbers and seeing possibilities.
Yes.
We're exploring them at this point. In terms of timing, then we have another meeting on the 27th of the month, and then we have a meeting the 10th of April. We're not being asked to adopt anything tonight, so I want to make that clear. So this is a great opportunity to hear things, to raise some questions, think about it. We'll come back. We'll probably have similar conversation next time. And then, as I recall, then do we adopt the budget?
The budget adoption will be in the April
10th meeting? Okay. So I just want people to understand that process, so that this is the time to have the discussion and ask the questions and think about these things.
So actually, if Captain Elizabeth will come up now, so we kind of flow through this process. Cover the first several pages. Can I borrow your?
You can.
The first several pages, I won't necessarily go through in detail because you've seen it, but I think it's always important reminder of what's the values and beliefs behind the budget in terms of what we're really trying to, the big picture, what we're trying to accomplish as we move forward. And so clearly we want schools to continue to be much more personalized for kids. So in other words, understanding their needs and figuring out how are we best meeting their respective needs. We want to create innovative environments that not only innovation for kids, but we want to create environments where adults are thinking about, I wonder if I could do that differently. And having that permission to want to try to do things differently and bring different ideas to the table. And so that becomes a big part of the budget, and certainly creativity in terms of the experiences of both students and staff, because we can't have people feeling their work is stale. Yeah, it's the same old routine over and over versus there's always the need for vibrancy, like excitement about what's to come, the new thing, and want to try different things. So that's what the budget provides us a chance to look at how do we create those stimulus, if you will, or those levers that we try to pull to kind of create some of those reactions. So I think that's just having that mindset, you appreciate, I think, a little bit more of some of the things that we're looking to do. The three big pieces that the voters will be asking today is the budget itself, the bus resolution, we'll hit both of those tonight, and the 3 seats for the Board of Education. So just give you some sense of where we're looking. This budget hearing is kind of a misnomer because by law, the budget hearing is actually after the board has already adopted the budget. However, so it's more like a presentation versus a hearing because people imply hearing that there's a back and forth. Yeah, people talk, but the budget's already been adopted by the board to go to the voters. But that's a legal stipulation that we don't control. It is what the law says, and we do it anyway as we move forward. Again, I'm not going to hit all these, but clearly the mission of the district drives our budget process. That's always our litmus test. How does this impact our overall mission, our goals and objective of the school district drives our budget process, because we all hold ourselves accountable to those goals, and so subsequently, do we have the resources to realize those goals? Very simple proposition. Can't hold someone accountable for something if you're not going to give them the resources to effectively do it. And so we want to make sure that the budget is, again, providing the resources to effectively meet the respective demands of the school district, the mission and goals. You're going to hear quite a bit today about the tax cap piece, because the tax cap now starts to have a bigger play in terms of final decisions that we start to make when we start analyzing all our needs and wants and those kind of things, and okay, what's the financial implication of it? So tax cap kicks into the equation probably more so in this conversation and the next conversation than any time before, because we don't go into the budget to say, here's our ceiling. We go into the budget and say, let's bring our best ideas to the table, make heads and tails out of them, and then we start doing some prioritization, and then we start seeing the fiscal impacts on it. So the tail is not wagging the dog in that situation. So it's important to understand those kind of things. Value add, cost effectiveness, 2 major pieces of it. What values are added to the organization? Cost effectiveness, by the way, doesn't say cost cutting, because we're always looking to repurpose resources. recognizing, okay, if we're saving something here, does it create an opportunity for us to do some other things that we need to do or want to do over here without changing the cost footprint? So we look at cost effectiveness, and so we look at situations like, wow, can we in fact do that better in order for us to allow us to do something else? So we ask those questions all the time. So that's what cost effectiveness comes from, and trying to leverage different things as we move forward. So the questions that we ask, and I won't go through them, but you've seen them before in terms of the things that we try to ask and answer. So this was our conceptual model, if you will. That last time we met, these are some big areas that we want to hit. And so tonight you're going to see how we go from these conceptual areas to what does that translate to specific FTEs, full-time equivalent staffing, because we use the word program, but program is actually people, because we hire people to administer programs. So it's important that we're going to go through some of these kind of things. And certain pieces that fell off, for instance, right here, the ESSA impact. We put that out there because we weren't sure where the state of New York was going with some things. And right now, the state is probably 18 months out from having some of those things have an impact on us. So from a budget perspective, there's not a cost we could associate with it. However, from a program planning perspective, we start thinking about what kind of PD, what kind of courses that we're doing now, how are we modifying courses now. So if or when things change, we'll be ahead of that curve, so to speak, as we move forward. So there's not a specific dollar impact at this point. Just kind of point out as one of those things that was a part of our concept model that drops off the table when we start actually applying real dollars to certain things. Hope that makes sense. So if you see some things, hey, why don't we do that? Well, it's not that we're not doing that. It doesn't have a dollar impact at this point, or a direct dollar impact. So Kathy's going to come in a minute here after I talk about this. So we're talking about repurposing So we have this year 14. We thought, actually up until this morning, I thought it was 15. One person pulled back their retirement, which was kind of like, anyway, so we're down to 14 retirees. And so when we look at retirees, we look at it as, okay, we know that someone's leaving at this salary, we might be hiring someone something below. And so then what opportunity does it present to us to potentially rehire or even add some additional staff with the same cost footprint? And that's an important piece of it, because one of the things the tax cap does is kind of creates a ceiling for us, and so our cost footprint almost becomes defined. So what's those repurposing opportunities? And so for the purpose of this, we use what we call average step 4 for rehires. So in this case, 14 people. We make the assumption that if we rehire these people at average step 4 and what they're leaving at, this is what we're looking at, about $540,000 that we can do. And that's going to make sense because we're going to be proposing staffing. And if you look at the number of staffing that we're proposing, you're thinking, wow, how can you propose all those staff and have a relatively small impact on the budget? Well, because we look at these repurposing opportunities. So that's kind of put in context. So we look at that as an opportunity to do some additional things, some things that we absolutely need to do and some things that we want to do to enhance programs. So this gives you some sense of this. All these will be on the April agenda, and we invite these people to come so you'll get a chance to put faces with all these pieces. The second piece to this, too, is that when we start looking at these positions, there are some of these positions that we absolutely need to know for sure we're going to rehire as titled next year. So some point in April, before the public adopts the budget, we're going to start doing anticipated hiring to get ahead of the hiring curve, to try to get the best people early in the spring, because that's when the best crop is versus in August. So we're going to try to get ahead. And there's some positions on here already. We know that, okay, we won't hire back in that same way. We're going to hire something else because of needs changes. So we're going to look at some of those later on in the process. So it's not necessarily a one-to-one replacement. It's also like, okay, what's the best way to replace it? So we think about repurposing not only from a dollar perspective, but from a program effective perspective. So does that make sense? It makes sense in my mind, so I just want to make sure it makes sense to you.
This is actually, you're kind of going out there on a limb on transparency. If I'm right,
Yeah.
This is the first year that we put a number on
Yep.
this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And the reason why we put that number, because you'll start hearing districts across talking about budgets are tight. Some places already talking about deficits, and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, knock on wood, we must be doing something right here, because we're talking about enhancing programs, yet keeping a very moderate impact for our taxpayers, which has always been our goal as we move forward. So kudos to a lot of people as we move forward, some of those kind of things. Another big repurposing opportunity that we look at everything. I mean, literally, Kathy, kudos to Kathy and her folks. They break down every cost and look at cost trends, look at prior year expenditures, all these kind of things to make heads and tails of where the trends going based upon past history data, based upon what we know now. So we look at things like the debt service, and as a board, we've been looking at debt service and retiring debt, and those create opportunities for us. So our mortgage payment, in other words, goes down, and so it creates an opportunity to say, okay, it's kind of like you pay off one car, does that same car payment give you opportunity to do something else, put a roof on your house that you probably wouldn't have done if you had another outstanding payment. So just kind of using that for example. So we look at those opportunities, utilities. We track that all the time. We try to have energy management. We had a new replacement for Dave West. Those kind of things pay off in terms of how we look to manage energy. And so all these, what seem like relatively small amount for almost $170 million budget, adds up very quickly in terms of our ability to do some additional things moving forward. And you're going to hear about some of those additional things. And in many cases, additional things that we're doing are going back to enhance our instructional capacity. A good portion of the additional staffing are direct impact on kids, and which is always our objective, direct impact on kids type programs. Good.
What does it mean, special education costs for parentally placed students? Are those students coming back?
No,
Or
so
we're paying for services?
so every year that number fluctuates.
Okay.
And so we look at what outside placements that we have in the school district. And so for instance, we have kids who might be going to a private parochial school, but there's a special education component. We didn't sign them up to go to private parochial school, but we're responsible for the special education component of the education. And so that's where the parentally placed piece, because we have, this not on this one, we have some private placements that's actually going up because we have, again, it's fluid. It's based upon kids coming in. There's certain kids that we cannot effectively provide programming in-house for. And so that's where we privately place kids in certain programs out of district. So this is more of those kind of things where we have those situations. Does it make sense?
Right, and so it's, there are fewer situations like this.
Like that. It could be,
That's a
exactly.
90,000.
And so the point, and that's a great one, because that's one of those kind of things, we look at all those things as a potential opportunity, because we squeeze 90,000 here, that creates maybe FTE
Right.
elsewhere.
Yeah.
To enhance the program for 25 kids or 30 kids or 125 kids if you're certain teachers, depends on how many periods a day that you're teaching. So those are kind of things. Great question.
I was kind of curious about the fuel transportation thing. I assume that we're not expecting the cost of fuel per gallon is going to go down. So is this redistributing the routes and making more fuel efficient buses?
It is that, Gary. So kudos. If you recall, even going back some years, we started GPSs on buses, and in fact later on you're gonna hear part of Mr. Karam's presentation. There's one slide on there talking about some of the GPS data that we use. We have more accurate information on routes, on all those things now than any time in the past, and it will continue to get more so. So we're using that information to tighten all those things up. And so when you think about going almost 2 million miles a year, that's a lot of mileage, a lot of fuel. And if we tighten that up, that's savings. And so even that, I mean, so when you look at that, so on the transportation side, for example, you're going to hear Kathy talk about later on, we're looking at fuel savings, but on the transportation side, we also then expending more money on professional development for our bus drivers. And so repurposing is a perfect example of that, how we look at something and put it back into the system to make something else better. So we have better trained drivers and all those, how to interact with kids, how all those things become important. So that's a perfect example of how the repurposing piece takes place throughout the system. So these are just some examples of when we look at repurposing opportunities and how then that helps us with some of our staffing piece, which I'm going to ask Elizabeth to come in and kind of give you some of the backstory, if you will, on some of the staffing piece, even the process, because I think sometimes people look at numbers and don't appreciate the process of how we get to this point of having these as some final recommendations. You want to do this or you want me to do it?
It's just the one slide. So you notice the 9.4 number up there. Based on the process that we go through and all the initial requests, it probably could have been 40. Really, there are a lot of requests as we go through a process, but I think it's most important to note that there is a very structured process. And we start by saying, it really starts with Kathy putting out a budget calendar. This is the sequence. And then we start setting up our meetings. And some of the things that I reference in terms of it could be a larger number are people's ideas. Ideas are great, and part of the process is narrowing that down. We're going to look at real student performance data. We're going to look at really what happens if we make somebody's schedule, can it work? How do we say, that would be nice, that's a nice thing. Not necessarily something that's immediately aligned to our goals, and not something that is going to immediately help students increase their performance. And so we follow a very disciplined process to arrive at what is outlined on the list behind you, and so, or behind me. So I would start, my list follows a slightly different order. So I'll go from a level perspective. At the elementary level, we are currently reviewing student performance numbers across all 8 elementaries. We look at what's our current staffing need, how are our students performing on common assessments and then New York State assessments as well. And then we look at, we apply a multiplier based on school enrollment and look at needs of the various schools to make sure that we have an allocation of AIS providers and special education providers that meet the needs of those individual schools. To have another 0.5 there to allocate when we sit down and lay out all of those numbers will be very useful to make sure that we are truly able to deploy folks where we need them to meet the needs of students as they move through our 8 elementary schools. We may even be looking to adjust that upward slightly as we sit and look at real-time data this, in another month or so.
At the risk of sounding a little ignorant, what does the 9.4 stand for? I'm sorry.
So the total number of all those 1.6 add up to the 9.4 full-time. So 1.0 is a full-time. So we basically have 9 equivalent 9 full-time person and a part-time person, which is.
Okay.
So at the high school, that would be teaching 2 classes out of 5 classes. It would be a 0.4 out of a 1.0 whole.
So, Elizabeth, while we got you distracted, I want to go back to a point that Mr. Casey said, and I think it's an important point, that this is a process even, so that's why I'm looking for this paper, because the day that Kathy and I met, we put all this stuff, and Elizabeth sent me, I was talking to some other folks, and let's think about this. So it's an ongoing process, and I say that because we know there's certain things that will almost absolutely happen the way we're articulating right now. We know that there's certain things that we still have to assess to say, do we still need a 0.6 here, or do we need something someplace else as a result of information that we're gathering? Because the problem that we have right now, when I say the problem, the challenge that we have with budget, here we start this process in October, and here we sit in March, making for a budget that's going to be approved in May, that we're going to execute in September. A lot of stuff happened in between there. So we're sitting here with the best information, best assumptions, that once we get to September, we have enough capacity. So if you think about it as a board, don't necessarily think about the individual pieces. That's why sometimes it's a dangerous proposition when we give specifics on someone like, oh my God, in the budget you said I'm getting this. Well, okay, at that point, there was a need. However, as a result of something else, we might be doing some adjustment. So if you think about in a larger sense of capacity, do we have enough capacity to do some things that we now identify as our tier 1 priorities, if you will, because we have tier 2, tier 3, we have always a different variation of needs. So if you think about that sense as a board, we don't get caught into someone coming back and say, I thought you were going to hire exactly this. Right. Once we get to the budget hearing, we'll be much clearer in terms of absolutely what we're going to do, because there's certain positions people want, like a 0.2. We can't hire. Who's going to come and work for a 0.2? So there might be a want, but we're saying, I hear you, but we can't do it because we can't hire for it, for example. So I mean, I just want to make sure as a board you understand that context, because that's when you get jammed up as a board member. Someone, well, I thought we were supposed to be doing it, and the presentation said it. This is an ongoing process. Even after the budget is adopted, the administration becomes the hardest part of it. Because now we have to execute all this in a practical sense.
Exactly. Additionally, we're looking at addressing the psychologist capacity at Shadakon Aranjan, and we're still ironing out what those details would look like, but recognizing that some additional supports there are likely warranted. At the middle school, we would like to be able to maintain the position that Vanessa Kramer has filled, which is the instructional technology integration teacher, for 1 additional year. The rationale behind it takes time for our instructional staff to really fully integrate the one-to-one devices. We've seen some really great practices happening and taking off at the middle school. Another year of having an individual, a skilled individual in that position to help assist teachers as they look to really challenge their own practices and integrate technology, I think will be really beneficial.
Elizabeth, how do you see that position evolving? It sounds like you're recommending just one more year. So you must have a plan for where it's going to go.
It would basically be, it's a teacher currently right now, as this year, the teacher is on special assignment.
Right,
Her
yes.
position is, the current teacher is a grade 6 math teacher. That position is being held for her to
I
go
see.
back to.
Okay.
So there is a stipulation that we can, under the law, pull a teacher out and put, it's called literally a teacher on special assignment. Sometimes in jargon you hear it referred to as a TOSA, teacher on special assignment. So she is currently a teacher on special assignment. So the goal is to repost this position as we would need to, because it was a 1-year appointment, not a 2-year appointment, and see who would be interested in applying, recognizing that we would probably have a few different individuals interested, and we would look at experience and, what we've learned from this year and look to make another 1-year, we would recommend to the board another 1-year appointment.
And it follows a model that we've used with the rollout of
Yep,
Math
yep.
and the Journeys program,
Okay.
where find somebody, one of their own,
Yes.
who is experienced in the classroom, who can coach people along, mentor them along, and it's proven wonderfully successful.
It really has. It's amazing how you always think, oh, you'll bring in great folks from the outside. There are some great folks outside, but most great folks really have jobs that, if they're educators, they have jobs in high-performing public schools, and we have the best of the best, many of them, and it's really nice to leverage them, and their colleagues know them, they know their history, they understand that they understand the context in which we're operating, and so their input really is very beneficial. So at the high school, we do know that we have a large class right now at High School West. That larger class is moving to East, and we are going to have a little, we'll feel it just a little bit at East. Right now we think it'll be about 50 students more at East, which our that over the entire school is not really significant. But when we look at our current class enrollments, our preference is to account for it in the budget so as not to significantly impact class sizes across the board next year at the high school. So we are going to monitor enrollment in elective courses at the high school. We will see, it's hard when the folks at the high school come and say, we're at the point of, are we going to disenroll these 80 students from these courses? And sometimes the conversation is, what level are they? If they're sophomores, do they have other opportunities to take this course in the future? Are they seniors, and have they been waiting to take this course for a long time? And so sometimes we make decisions, talk about flexibility, and hard to know exactly where that would be deployed now. Perfect example of if we need to add, a little bit more in the area of business to make sure that these students have opportunity for sports management or something, hypothetically.
I see LOPE isn't one of those classes, but it's still full. How do we escape having to 0.6 there, for instance?
Great question. The world language sections break out a little bit differently because we have so many more tracks. And because we've needed more tracks, because we've had all the different languages, we overall have slightly lower class sizes in those world languages right now. As we roll those forward, we're not seeing as though it's going to have a significantly detrimental effect. It's so interesting. Sometimes just 10 additional students going into one course make 2 sections. It's like, are you going to run 1 section? Are you going to run 2 low? Or 10 more if you have, say, 64 students. Are you going to run 2 sections at 32? Are you going to try to run a 3rd section of that, which then brings it down lower? So sometimes it's not even about the total overall numbers, but how they break out. And right now our projection is that they're going to be okay. We will monitor that as well. That's a great question.
Flexibility you're talking about.
It is. We anticipate increased enrollments in the area of technology based on the 2 new courses. It was really nice. Those of you who are at Community Conversations know a few folks came just to talk and had an interest in the new courses courses that you approved that will be going into the technology department, computer science discoveries, and MIT app development. I already mentioned the enrollment and class sizes that will be playing out across the core areas. And you'll notice the difference in science. As Dr. Robinson said, first of all, there is no such thing as a 0.6 in science. They're all 0.25s because of the lab component. So, and to hire, we're probably looking at needing a chemistry or physics. That's just not possible. It would not be something we could fill, and when we look at it, it's not as though we're running exceptionally small sections as they are, so it would be well used in science. We are looking at consideration for personal development and fitness period 0 as a pilot program for physical education. We know we have more demand for that personal development and fitness than we are able to fit in the period 1 to 9, and just trying that as for one section. And we are also looking for the one-to-one rollout 9-12, that we would have a high school technology integration coach at 9-12 as well next year, recognizing that we have a very new experience coming to high school teachers that, even more interestingly, they will have students in front of them in grade 9 who have experienced one-to-one already, and teachers their experience is new to that. Yeah.
The performance development, for the,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, yeah. What's the yield on that? What was the number on that? I just don't see it.
0.2,
Point two.
probably.
Okay, I'm sorry.
The elective piece of
Okay,
that.
Yeah.
all right, sorry.
Yeah.
The internal piece I sent to you gave a little bit more detail
Okay.
than the aggregate.
Yeah, it's broken
piece.
down differently
Okay.
by school.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. We're also looking at supplying some additional supports to High School West, recognizing that the Wellness Center at High School East has really taken off, and that very often students transitioning from the middle school to High School West would benefit from some additional wellness supports as well.
Can I ask a question about that? Is there any plans to expand the contract with the Saratoga Center for the Family
Not,
into high
not
school?
in this
Not in
sequence.
this-
So we're opting to do
The
something more
FTE
specific to
rather than,
West.
okay.
Then, so it's all under the larger mental health support umbrella, mental health wellness support umbrella. So we want to do that this year because right now the capacity we have is largely hitting K-8 and it's pretty good. And so we'll monitor that. I mean, the good or bad thing of it, to expand it isn't significant. It's not a significant cost, but we just don't want to expand for the sake of expanding. We want to look at where the needs are going. And if we have to make adjustments, it's not we're not hiring people. It's just a matter of bringing a contract extension to
true.
the board at some point.
Okay.
So for the K-12 look, we are proposing 0.5 additional for English as a new language. Our numbers, if we follow the trend over the last 5 years, have increased really consistently. We also anticipate a portion of this 0.5 is likely to go to the middle school based on if their need, as is outlined now, looks the same to be for next year, that would probably be deployed there. But again, we will wait and see exactly how things look at the end of the year and then as we head into the next school year. We are proposing 2.5 special education teachers, and you'll notice that that's the biggest line item on its own, based on needs identified across the district, growing numbers in some special programs. And we really want to make sure that we're adequately supporting the needs of students as they move through our system in various schools. I'm also really enthusiastic about the fact that we are proposing middle school and high school transportation for summer
We just
school.
picked it up on the other slide.
Oh, is that picked up on another?
No. It's just
Oh,
okay.
that's
Yeah,
right.
on your notes, but-
Thank you. I did have that on my notes. Good. So you'll
Any
pick that up?
questions from Elizabeth? So as Kathy come forward, again, I think it's important for the board because sometimes people, we don't necessarily as a board and administration go through everything with a fine-tooth comb because so much of our budget is preserving existing programs. But what we want to do is, back to larger, what are some of the value-add things that we bring into the table so you as a board member know that, these things are supporting the bigger picture, if you will, that as a board governance, leadership governance that we look at moving forward. So it's kind of keeping that as the backdrop. And again, we're going to massage these numbers after the administration to make sure that when we assign an FTE, we know that we could understand the impact implication. because there's always needs someplace else. So how do we prioritize those needs become a big part of the equation. So that's a big piece of it. So Kathy's going to walk through the probably next several slides here. We're going to say, so we went from the instructional side to, not that athletics isn't instructional, but moving now towards more operational budget pieces.
So the first item is coaches, and because we're seeing increased students joining these athletic events, we're adding 2 assistant boys and girls cross-country assistants, so 1 boys, 1 girls. And also the girls assistant track coach evens out the boys and the girls coaches. So, and we're seeing increased participation there as well.
Kathy, what did they say? What, 250 kids?
Large numbers.
Yeah.
It's scary.
250 kids on the track team this year, outdoor. Wow.
Large numbers.
But that's good. I mean, all
That's
good
good.
stuff. It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's
So we
awesome.
want to support that and make sure
Absolutely.
it's safe.
Is it modified in high school or just high school?
The track is
Track is track, all of it, yeah.
You know, and
It's all
so some of the younger kids, modified is kind of like we call it almost like a friendship league thing, but it's mainly for, you want to say high school
Middle
level,
school.
a lot of numbers. Huge,
For the 250 high school?
yeah,
Oh.
huge numbers, yeah.
Additionally, in the athletic area, we're increasing some of the budget for supplies, entry fees, and overtime. Just more kids, obviously, creates a little more work.
So the overtime is one comment. Overtime is an interesting one. So the more successful we are as a system, our kids play longer into seasons. And,
Oh, right.
and the more chaperones, the more this, and so it's one of those things I laugh at thing like, okay, that's the price we pay for success. We pay, we postseason is longer. Most teams play 7 games in certain sports. We're playing 9 or 10, or so that's one of those price you pay for success kind of thing. Minimal price, but just kind of want to point out that's the irony too.
Right.
You do better, you extend your season longer.
You heard us during the goals presentation, our mid-year presentation. We talked a lot about professional development, and the support staff is now kind of an area of focus that we're looking at. This year, we're having non-instructional support folks come to the superintendent's conference day for a handful of hours, 3 to 4 hours, I believe. And next year, we're planning the same for both superintendent conference days. So we've added some money for that. And during the year, Al does a lot of training with his staff. In fact, some of the trade-off for the fuel consumption and prices being lower is that we're adding more professional development meetings and presentations for Al's staff. He's done a great job with that and continues to just add more as needed to focus on safety. Maintenance and grounds and operations. As you know, we're kind of undergoing some transition there. Clyde has already started doing safety meetings once a week with his folks, with his grounds and maintenance folks. And Barb Saliger, with her being back, she's also going to be doing regular meetings with her staff, building to building, as opposed to pulling them all in a group. So lots going on in professional development. The next item kind of goes to what we had talked about with the special education increase in needs. I put the number of students that we have right now in private and BOCES placements. That always fluctuates somewhat with students coming in, students coming out, which placement is the best. But we do have some very costly students with some high needs. Several of them over $100,000 each. So it's no small budget line item. So we're adding about $400,000 there this year to try to accommodate some of our overages that we've identified this year. We're actually going to be eking out the special ed budget this year because they're finding a lot of tuitions that need to be paid, both private and BOCES. And then charter school tuitions, we don't have a lot of those kids, but that fluctuates too. This year we had about 8 students. Whether they stay in charter schools, we're not necessarily sure because they come back and forth, but we added an additional 4 students to our budget line item at about $12,000, $13,000 apiece, just to ensure that we covered that. We have a lot of external mandated cost drivers that we obviously can't control a whole lot. TRS, as you know, the percentage is increasing this year, almost 1%, which adds about $660,000 to our budget. And while ERS that percentage contribution, which is the percentage of salaries, is decreasing by about 0.4%. It still adds about 106,000 because of, raises and additional staff that we had. And if you remember, during the mid-year, we're actually over budget slightly in the non-instructional folks this year. So we've had a lot of activity there. Good news to...
Marguerite, I'll answer your question before you ask it. So the TRS side, the pension cost piece, the teacher's retirement system, so instructional staff and people who've been through the instruction, right, they're in that retirement system. ERS is employee retirement system. It's support staff, bus drivers, just support staff in general. We have to pay a percentage of payroll to them, and they do this averaging over 3 years, I think, of what the market does and how much money they need to support. So it's not when we have a choice. They send us a number and say, this is what it's going to cost you this year. And as you can see up there, with the teachers, it went up 0.8, and with the employee system, it come down 0.4. The biggest cost we have is on the TRS side, on the teacher side, because that's the biggest component of our personnel.
So congratulations, you're not ready?
Let's run for the board.
We're starting economy tomorrow in class.
Moving on to benefits, health insurance is obviously always a big number for us, around $24-25 million, but I'm happy to report that this year we're actually seeing a cost reduction. We've worked a lot with our brokers, as well as negotiating our contracts. If you recall, we've actually eliminated Empire Matrix, which is an old plan, indemnity plan. We've eliminated MVP. And a lot of enrollments are now driving towards CDPHP. And I should probably say we didn't eliminate Empire Matrix. Empire eliminated Empire Matrix. But it was a high-cost plan. So a lot of enrollments are driving towards CDPHP, but we still have some enrollments that are not CDPHP. But the biggest factor here, I think, in the cost reduction is really revolving around prescription. In this year, we've always used Express Scripts as our pharmacy benefit manager, the last few years anyway. And now BOCES has a consortium that obviously has a lot of districts in it, so a lot of buying power, a lot of good rebates, a lot of good discounts, and they also have now a component within the prescription plan that audits the pharmacy benefit manager. So if they're cutting corners or not giving us the discounts that we're supposed to have, they audit their books. So they've seen great success, and we're anticipating that we're going to see some savings there. So that's a huge portion of that. We have increased participation in health insurance buyouts, which is a good thing. That reduces our health insurance line. And this year, we're adding the CSEA Vision program. That was part of our negotiations with CSEA this year, and we've increased our budget for that.
So do we understand the health insurance buyouts? Everybody knows what we're talking about with that? So in other words, if me and my spouse work for the school district, instead of us having two separate plans, our spouse works in a place else, okay, I'm not going to take the insurance, but you're going to pay me a dollar amount, which is significantly less than what we would have paid if you took health insurance, because I already have coverage elsewhere. So in other words, you don't want to have people have duplicate coverage, and you're just paying for something that you could be getting from elsewhere. So we try to really promote the buyout in those situations.
The next item is a big one. This is the local share of summer school special ed programs. In the governor's budget, he's proposing to decrease the state's contribution percent and increase the districts. For years and years, the districts have only paid 20% of the summer school special ed costs, and the state picked up the other 80%. He's now talking about reducing their share and increasing ours to, in our case, it would be 51%, but it adopts our excess cost aid, state aid percent. which is 49%. So that results in a $397,000 increase to our budget, which we're hoping in the final analysis will go away or at least be reduced. But that's a huge line item for us that sort of came out of the blue, so to speak.
And that came up, I just mentioned for folks who weren't at the legislative day. No one knew about this, that we talked, you, I referred to it last week, you provided instructions to the legislators who met about this and about the potential impact, not only to our district, but the district across the board. This was one that was under the sheets.
And they were all surprised.
Yeah, they were surprised, yeah.
So keep this in mind when we get to the end, because we're going to show you with and without. You can email us.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about as we get to that piece. So again, we want to make sure that we don't want to go too fast that you miss details, but we don't want to go too slow that we bore you either. So we try to find a moderate in between pace there.
So other operational investments, certainly we've talked a lot about safety and security, so we've set aside $160,000 in our budget to invest in additional considerations for security. And I just wanted to mention also, we already in our budget have about $140,000 for SAVE initiatives that we've had in our budget for the last several years as well. So a good $300,000 towards safety and security. Operations and maintenance, operationally speaking, they're increasing their budget slightly for some of those things, supplies, refuse, contractual substitutes, overtime, that kind of thing. And as Elizabeth mentioned, summer school, another item that we're adding to the budget this year is transportation for summer school, which is a 6-week program. That's about $42,000 for those students that need to go to summer school but don't have the resources to get there. Tech upgrades. This is a cool one. Transportation is installing Wi-Fi in about 20 buses as kind of a pilot program. We'll see how that goes. That goes along also with the initiative that we talked about with the substitutes, utilizing the last item that we had approved. Their iPads.
Oh, the Tyler.
What was it called?
Was it Tyler? Yeah.
Tyler Drive, so that they can see the students that are supposed to be at each stop and where they're supposed to be. So that's pretty exciting. IMS is increasing their budget about $108,000. Costs are always going up, and there's always new and great things coming out there. But obviously, we're increasing the one-to-one program, and the obsolescence that we have on servers and devices and computers around the district. There's an ongoing plan there as well. And we also agreed to some clerical support for nurses this year. So looking at the budget, we know that our budget is 80% salaries and benefits. So these are our 3 categories of salaries. As you can see, instructional salaries by far are our largest cost, which makes sense, going up about 2.5% this year. Administrative salaries, I should also mention we're in negotiations still with both the instructional and the STA and SA. Oh my gosh. So we had to make some assumptions there and use some trend percents for those. Non-instructional salaries, I'm happy to say we did settle with CSEA, so we know those percents. And so that amount is going up about $1.6 million in total, about 5.5% or so.
So just want to point out one thing for Pat to turn the page. So we've mentioned the 9.4 FTE, and also we have these strategic increases. It's a negative number because a lot of that is a repurposing impact of those. So you see, like, what happened to the other number you had on there? So we put it into the mix between what we add and what we're reducing, the net impact that. So we look at, overall, these are contractual adjustments based on some trend lines. And this is strategically some things we're looking to add, and you see that the strategic impact is a negative impact, even though we add in staff and beyond the contractual trend lines.
Is that the net of the 504,000 plus the 9.4?
Yeah, so it
Right.
offset
Okay.
the two things. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So it kind of gives you some, I just want to point out that, so you saw one side, so I want to be purposely, this is how it translates into bottom line dollars, so to speak, and you'll see that throughout the budget sequence. And I'll try to highlight some of those, that's related to some other things that you see.
And about half of the PD, half of the number for the increase in non-instructional is for the PD,
Yeah.
professional development. Equipment, we're pretty much staying flatline. There was a little shift from buying outright equipment at IMS versus going to BOCES. Contractual, going up very little
Can
again.
you just give a flavor of some of the things that fall into that?
That fall into contractual. Utilities go there. Our JCI, Johnson Controls contract, everything that we have to do with maintenance.
I mean, just want to give you a flavor. So it's not union
Right.
salary contracts.
Right.
It's contracts with companies that do provide certain
Like the
services.
fuel
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Tyler?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Text and library, again, we maximize what we can earn back in instructional materials aid. So that number stays relatively flat, but we try to maximize that amount every year, and it roughly approximates to a little over 900,000. BOCES, we talked about that additional 400,000, as well as some additional costs, I think, with IMS. That's why in the strategic column, we're seeing about 445,000
Some
additional
of the special
there.
ed placements,
Right.
and then the IMS, because we run all our purchases for computers through BOCES to maximize the aid.
Some of that is our BOCES administrative
Correct.
aids that we have to.
Yeah, that goes with that. too.
A
It's all about
mandatory
that.
cost,
Yeah.
yes. Supplies, we're seeing a slight decrease, pretty flat line there. Benefits, again, pretty flat line, actually a slight reduction there, which is incredible given a $46 million number. And then under the transfers to other funds, if you notice under debt service, we're actually reducing our debt service, which is our mortgage payment, by about 200,000. But we've increased the summer special ed by
That's
453,000.
that legislation that we're watching.
The legislative
So if that
piece.
changes, it creates an opportunity point for us to discuss, which we're talking about.
It's not 300-something thousand, it's
Yeah.
453?
That's included in that piece, if that's correct.
Mhm. So then, going to the bottom line, as we look at our draft budget, that includes this local share of special ed increasing. The increase is about $4 million, or 2.36%. If we exclude that additional local share, our budget increase drops to 2.13%. So it's a significant difference as we look at that. And then the three-part budget, this is the breakdown between administrative, program, and capital. And as you would expect, the the program piece, which includes instructional, is the highest percentage. Administrative is the lowest, and then capital is, our debt service, our maintenance and grounds, that kind of piece.
How does that compare in New York State, like the averages for New York State?
I would say probably close. The big piece that we watch is consistency from year to year.
Right.
Most people should be in this,
75%?
if just going direct instruction, if they're in the business for the right reasons.
Okay.
Right. And then as we look at the 5-year budget trend, we're at about 2.1%. So we're right around that area at 2.36.
This is with that including the special ed piece. So this is kind of our worst case scenario
Right.
kind of perspective right now.
Okay.
So think about that, so anything happening positive from here is all bonus opportunity points for us to have future conversations.
Right. And then moving on to some of the averages, as you can see, state aid and tax levy together is about 97% of the revenue sources for our budget. CPI is up this year. Last year was 1.26. We're at the 2.0 cap this year. Tax-based growth factor is up slightly this year. And our tax cap is at 3.65, which is up from last year, which was 2.97. So that's increased significantly this year based on the formula. You can see the 3-year average tax cap is about 2.31, average levy 1.46. Interesting, our true tax rate 3-year average is a decrease, and that's largely because our taxable assessed values have grown so much, as they do every year. We have quite a lot of growth in our district, so there's more assessments to spread the tax levy over, which has resulted in lower tax rates, even though the tax levy has increased. So that's kind of a bonus for us. And then, whoops, sorry.
The paper the other day, they published the anticipated increase in the levy for school districts throughout the area. And they used, for us, they used 2.353. This year's a little bit different.
Where did they get that?
3.53. This is a little higher. Is that because this is a more updated figure? They use
This is certainly more updated.
Come on, the tax cap piece, Gary, you mean?
the tax levy. You see, there was apparently something we had to send into the state at our anticipated levy.
Oh, we probably sent in the tax
Okay, so
cap early.
Actually, we're going to get to that in a second.
Okay.
So hold that thought for 1 second. Yep, sorry. Yeah. So Gary's jumping ahead, you know. He knows way more than he realizes he knows. So we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that in a second. When we talk about the tax levy impact as a result of the tax cap. Yeah.
So this is a comparison of our adopted budget for 17-18. Our budget based on tax cap, which is the formula, that would drive a budget that increases 2.6%. Our preliminary budget that includes that additional summer special ed piece is 2.36, which is under our tax cap. And then the preliminary budget is 2.13. That's excluding the additional summer special ed piece.
Hold on, Kath. So, I want to make sure because this becomes a significant point for the board, maybe not tonight, but as we watch the state budget picture, we are already starting with even our worst case scenario right now, below the tax cap, below the budget that the tax cap formula would drive. That's an important part for the board to know, okay, we're already below that benchmark. So anything beyond that point would create either opportunities for us to look at some program enhancement or look at some further tax levy reduction, which we're going to talk about when we switch gears over here.
And that relates to the question I asked at the beginning about what's the process, when do we adopt this? So the formal adoption of the budget is, and our schedule is April 10th. The presumption is at that point, we have the state number.
What you agreed on, yeah.
That was
So we'll know
that was
then.
always our issue when they were doing late budgets.
Yep.
Is my friend described it, it was like bowling in the dark.
Yeah.
Guessing at what they were going to do, and the legislature, the credit, have normally pushed the governor's number up, so that would be good news.
And this year, I think they're trending on time. The one house came out today, the Senate and the Assembly, so, yeah. And, but the trick will be, you got that Easter holiday on the 1st, so it'll be around there, but,
Everybody's shooting for the 28th.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's what I'm hearing too.
So going back to, I think, Mr. Blatto's question, so if we use the tax cap allowance number, this is what the levy impact we were talking about. So when you see some numbers floating around, that's, they're assumption numbers. And so you'll see that number will change from time to time. And yes, they have to submit through the
OSC portals.
Comptroller's office form, and they pull all that stuff. But it's very preliminary. That's assuming that every district's going to maximize the tax cap, and here's the tax levy impact, which often for us is not the case. We're always below that tax impact. So that's where you probably saw that piece picking up at.
So looking at the 3 budgets again, the budgets numbers are across the top. Some are included, some are special ed excluded. The property tax cap, as you can see from 17-18 was 2.97%. If we were to maximize and spend the cap this year would be 3.65%, which would drive a tax levy of 122 million. And then without the special ed would be, oh, I'm sorry, that's the same because the tax cap stays the same. The next line shows what our actual tax levy was, 118 million at 2.1%. This levy that's here is what supports the budget that we just showed you at 3.31%, and then without the summer special ed, it's 2.97%. And then the bottom line shows you the difference between the tax levy and the tax cap. So last year, we had room of about just over 1 million, or 0.87. The budget that we have proposed currently is 407,000 less than the tax cap. If we were to eliminate the summer special ed increase, we would be 804,000 less than the tax cap.
So does that make sense? Again, I want to make sure, because that's, we're going to have another decision point once the state passed their budget. And we hope that it's a positive decision that determines, are we going to be looking at this budget sequence if the special education legislation is eliminated? And if that's eliminated and there's some additional revenue, are we going to have, so we have, Dr. Wood didn't go through it tonight, but we have what we call some tier 2 things, some things that we really, really would like to do if we have additional funding to do them, not significant costs, we're not adding another $500,000, but whatever, 100,000 here and 50 there. So we're going to watch that and then try to regulate that between, okay, how much of, so for instance, if we get additional, in fact, let's kind of go to this for a second. We'll just go to this last slide here, Cap. If right now the foundation aid that we're using is based on the governor's proposal. And typically you have the governor, you have Senate, you have Assembly. And as Mr. Stevens pointed out, the Assembly came out with theirs. So we're watching where's the Assembly in comparison to the governors, because we know the Senate is going to come somewhere in between, and then they're going to start fighting with each other. So the governor is already desperately trying to hold on to his, and that's why they're doing this equity with their budget directors. I think it's so funny, because I've never seen this guy before ever. Now he's doing all the television things talking about the state budget. So they're trying to balance. They want to try to hold their line, but they know that the legislative process is going to cause some increase. And so we see some increase in foundation aid. Beyond this piece of it, it obviously impacts in our bottom line tax levy impact. And so we see some increase here with the impact. Do we need to levy $122 million, or do we need to levy $121 million for compensation purposes? Or do we levy $121.5 million and drop some additional funds into some additional resources? And so our situation is still better than we presented here, but that's the big what if. So we approach the budget from this standpoint. We only know what we know right now, and if everything stays the same, this is a worst case picture. Quite frankly with you, the worst case picture looks pretty good, and in fact better than most places. So I share that with the board, but if we get to that decision point, we'll have alternatives for the board to consider in terms of what we do with any additional resources. And additional resources could be the elimination of the special education thing, which is no longer an expense for us. That we say, okay, do we just drop it out of the equation and go out with a 2.13 budget, or we use some of that to do something else? Decision point, some point for the board, probably the March 27th meeting, that we're hoping that by that time we would have a good sense of where the state is.
Right now, the room within the budget as far as what we're anticipating under the cap and what we could get, about $800,000.
Yeah, this one, yes, right? Yeah.
If we don't have the special ed summer piece.
Yeah, so exactly, Gary. So it's 804 without the summer and 407 with that piece of legislation in there. So a little piece of legislation is almost, it's like a double, almost half the impact.
You are in, Frank, I read something not too long ago that now the governor was saying that he's anticipating about $167 million more revenue than they initially had agreed upon. Is that incorporated into this?
So it's not for us, but it's incorporated into our wishful thinking. And it's interesting. we had the comptroller at our NISCUS convention last weekend, and it was interesting. He easily said, yes, it's more money than the governor has anticipated. And so we're all asking him, how much more? Well, I can't tell you that. It's just more. So the thing, though, that they're watching was an interesting phenomenon. If you remember, when they opened up the ability for people to prepay certain taxes as a result of the federal law changes, the question is how much of that is a false blip as a result of some of those type things that people started doing. And so they're kind of watching, is it real? Is it real trending up, or is it just a blip in the sequence? But we also know that every year, and I mean, been looking at it for 2 decades now, all the estimates are always low, period, because no one wants to get caught out there by estimating revenues and then fall short of those estimates. So it's always kind of like, we start this, and if we have to do this a little bit, we become heroes, because guess what? It's what's next year? A political year. People running for office, and it's great to say, yeah, we thought we're a little bit better than we anticipated, and we gave it back to taxpayers. You can read the headline already. So we're hoping, we don't see a lot of new money, but we think there will be some new money come to school. The question, though, is will it come to a place like Shen? That's where the big question comes in. Will we see some of the additional dollars?
What's your line?
If you're too rich to be poor, too poor to be rich, you know? And I think that's an important part, and that's why when we come to the board with a preliminary budget, so to speak, we come to you with a very realistic budget. Something that, guess what? Right now, we feel pretty good that people will appreciate what we're doing, and it's a passable budget. But the reality of it is we want to try to massage it right to the last minute, if you will, to put forth our best option to the public. But we don't come to the board with these wild, you know, yeah, we want to do this, and yeah, we plan to cut out $1 million out of it. No, we do all that before we come to you as a board, and that's why sometimes our process may look and feel differently from other school districts where people hear, oh yeah, we're starting out with a $5 million deficit. I would never ever come to the board with a conversation that we're starting with a deficit. I would come to the board, here are the things that we need to do in order to create a balanced proposition, and here are the sacrifices or the decision points we're going to make. Different conversation. And so again, our worst case scenario right now is actually very consistent with some of our past budget sequence as we move forward, because one thing we see here, you know, we talk about a tax levy of 3.31. As Kathy mentioned in the slide previously, that's why we put some of these graphics up there, the tax rate impact, even when we had tax levy increases, have been, Mr. Casey pointed out, $10 more. Very minimal, in some cases negative, because the tax levy and tax rate don't translate one-to-one. Because the tax rate is a result of the overall valuation of our schools. And as you see here, our growth factor, the 3 average full value growth is 2.36 of assessed growth. So we're a growing value district, and that helps to socialize the cost impact. So sometimes people see a tax levy of, oh my God, 3.31, that's what I'm going to pay. No, you're probably not, unless you did some major enhancement to your house, which is just a reflection of your price increase in your house, not necessarily a reflection of the tax levy impact. So does that make some sense? So we take that into consideration as we think about those propositions for the board. And so when we start thinking about things like this, for example, you know, the first proposition, okay, if we were to, so this is some point, that number is going to be finalized to come to the board. So proposition 1 will be the budget. So if we had to stop everything today, proposition 1, 173, tax levy 3.31, what we're thinking about the average impact per thousand, for example, is about 1.62%, about $28, 28 cents per 100, per thousand. So when you think about it, the first number probably sounds, oh my God, 3.31. Well, actually, per thousand is 28 cents. And so it's not a huge, and this is, again, a conservative estimation of what that impact would be, because we don't want to give falsely favorable information and turn out to be something different. We'd rather give something that's conservative and actually truly probably will be lower than anticipated. So this gives you a flavor, though, of how this percentage here translate into what people may be looking to actually pay across the district. district. So that's a good piece of it, and so we're talking about maybe, again, the average house, we use 250,000, recognizing that there's a wide variation, but that's like the average still within the region. So it's about $70 more on your tax bill. So some people think it's a big deal, some people probably think they're already paying too much taxes, but in reality, we trying to keep a very kind of flatline approach to it, and so that's within that reasonability test zone, if you will, as we move forward. And so before I switch gears, any piece on the budget piece, because I want Al to come and walk us through the bus proposition piece again real fast. So can we switch gears? So as Al comes forward, we try to, again, and Mr. DeLallo is always the advocate for let's buy more buses. And I'm sure every transportation director has appreciated him, said, "Oh, you're sure you only need that many?" And I'm sitting over cringing. He's okay. He's good. He's fine. So Al's just going to walk us through some of what we're proposing for transportation.
So the first slide you're going to look at, you've seen it before. What are the criteria that we use for bus replacement? Those are the criteria that go into our decision making, and it's a joint decision making. I'm not the only one that makes that. My head mechanic, assistant director, dispatchers, all that. Some of the mechanics are senior mechanics. We all have a play in that. So why a replacement plan? And while you're looking at this picture, don't get scared. We don't have that bus anymore. But this is why you need a workable bus replacement plan every year. That is an old bus that used to be here, and I think I mentioned it last year, where you can look at the bus from the outside and the bus from the inside, and you say, wow, that's a great looking bus.
Yellow.
Right, but what you don't see is in between those skins, what's going on. That is where the integrity of the bus really is. So what you're looking at right there is the upright, where the bows go, and that really gives you the strength in case of a rollover, if you will. So that is the bottom of that upright that attaches to the frame of the bus. And this is why you want to replace older buses up here in the Northeast. Unlike Texas, where they can keep them for 30 years, because they don't have salt and other chemicals that they put on the roads.
It's not, in many cases, it's not a motor issue, right?
Correct.
The motor's got more capacity
Then the body. That's correct.
Would it be true to say that, I heard this said at one time from a district administrator in another, do we actually encounter more salt on our roads in our 80 square miles than, say, a more rural district?
I think you do because of where we travel, the highways and the
More cars, more
yeah,
traffic.
more, exactly, yeah. I would say so.
That's an interesting point. Kathy probably correct me. So today we're talking to Clyde. So each year we allocate about 440 tons of salt for the season. And usually, this is what we allocate, but we usually don't use that much. This year already, we have used 610 tons. So that's 1.2 million pounds. And I was saying to Kelly, that's how much was like almost 25,000 50-pound bags of salt. So it kind of gives you some perspective, because literally if we have an inch of snow on the ground, we're using the same amount of salt as if we had 5 inches of snow on the ground, because they're going through the same piece. And so those are kind of things that people don't think about when we talk about dealing with winter weather and impact. And so this winter has been brutal already in terms of our treatment of roads. And that was like an astonishing number to me, thinking like, wow, when you really think about it. So a lot of, and it kind of goes to this. So we do have a lot more salt on the ground, chemicals that's impacting vehicles because of the frequency of storms that we've had over the past 2 months.
But I do want to say, the board's been very supportive in terms of the bus replacement. We've done some things to mitigate what you saw in that picture, such as getting Carwell rust treatment, which every bus gets for 10 years. We pay that up front, around $1,200, maybe a little bit more than that per bus for 10 years. So we're trying to mitigate some of that. But you still need to replace those buses. And our plan is 12 years on average for the large buses and 7 for the smaller ones.
6.4 now? I thought we had really creeped up.
Yeah, we crept up a little bit. We have about 28 buses that are between 12 and 15 years old, 38 buses between 10 and 11, 44 buses 6 to 9, and 103 between 1 and 5.
That's where the replacement plan is going. You want me to go to the next one?
Yes, sir. So the next slide is the prior year bus purchase for your information. As you can see, we're trying to keep up the replacement plan purchase at a even keel, which is very helpful for the budget, so you don't have the gyration in the budget, and we're not creating a bubble down the road where it's going to be very, very costly.
Different types of buses.
Right.
Yeah, it's the combination, which we're going to talk about.
Correct. So our recommendation for the bus purchase is to purchase 22 buses, various sizes, obviously, the cost not to exceed $2,309,000 and change. And as usual, we'll auction off old buses, repurpose them, or if push comes to shove, based on need, we may end up keeping one or two like we have done here in the past. And we're also adding one truck for grounds for salting and plowing, which is a total of 23 vehicles.
Any questions while we're on this page?
Just a general question. When you talk about cameras, the stop cameras, are any of our buses equipped with that, or are we anticipating having any of our?
We have not purchased the camera to go on the stop arm, but we are, last year, we purchased buses wired to take it in anticipation of getting the law passed, which, if you have not heard, it is in the governor's budget, which is great, and we're hoping that stays right there. And then we go ahead and get that and move forward with it. So here's a breakdown of the bus replacement. And you'll note last year we asked for some GMC Suburbans. We're asking for 2 more again. Again, we got that long ride out to Rochester on Mondays and Fridays. And on top of that, we're getting more and more homeless students where we're transporting all over the place. So we need those small vehicles to get us around, instead of sending a big bus. And we're also anticipating, you've seen the ESSA or ESA, however you want to say, the Student Succeeds Act, that will probably impact us in transportation as well. So we need to be prepared for that.
Is this a new plow truck or a replacement?
It's a new plow truck.
Is an addition or replacement of the existing one? That's the
Right.
question asked.
Okay. I saw all the tractors that were moving the snow around.
So we do a couple things. We lease bulldozers for
Okay.
winter stuff. So certain things it's not worthwhile us owning because we only use it for 2 or 3 months.
Okay.
But we do have some of our own plow trucks that we have because we use it for other purposes after we take the plows off it as well. So this is, and a lot of our stuff, old iron that's just been around forever. And we're getting to the point now where, okay, we need to make sure our trucks aren't breaking down. And this is just one of those that we need to add to our fleet. And so we'll see how does this impact our leasing for some of the front end dozers moving forward.
You got to approach the grounds vehicles just like you would the school buses.
Same thing.
Have a replacement plan for them. And they take a worse beating because a lot of them do have salts. They carry salts, and it does do a lot of damage to the frame and undercarriage and all that.
In terms of state aid for purchase, does the salt truck and so forth come under that, or is it
Only transportation.
Only transportation. Yes, sir.
But we put it under, because if we're going to bond, we try to bond everything. But one of the things that we've been trying to do is actually try to buy, if we can, as we get to the end of the year, to avoid the additional interest costs over time. So I think last year, I think Kathy mentioned that we paid off certain bus debt to reduce that impact and not having to pay interest costs from borrowing. So we'll look at that at the end of the year as we look at fund balance and things of the nature. We want to purchase certain things outright, we want to bond for it or not, and so we have to time it also in terms of the state aid reimbursement piece to make sure that we're not ahead of ourselves with when we're being reimbursed.
cash purchase still reimbursed at the same rate?
Yeah,
as a
yeah.
bond?
That doesn't change. The piece that we're concerned about, and from a legislative piece, is one of the pieces in the governor's proposal is to cap expenditure-driven, and transportation is one of those. And so here we are looking at the bus replacement cycle, which is absolutely insane when you think about that, because if places are compelled to keep buses longer, what's the safety factor, one, that you're potentially risking, and then what's the additional cost of constantly repairing older vehicles over and over. So that's the reason why that legislation on the surface, on the face, doesn't even make sense, much less when you start analyzing, because it goes contrary to what every good organization should be doing, having some kind of replacement cycle, so we're not paying excessive costs for deferred maintenance. So this is, again, back to your lobbying, this is how, if that goes next year, we could be having a whole different conversation about bus replacement as a result of that piece of it.
So the next one, let's talk about the investments that the board has made in transportation. Let's talk about the GPS and telematics. Talking about the video systems inside those school buses. They help us in terms of changing driver behaviors, make them more safe drivers. They actually help us maximize our time because as we're looking at video, then we can inspect what we expect out of our colleagues out there. Since we can't be in every bus every day, there's not enough of us. It saves us labor time on our part and on the school administrators' parts when there are issues on the bus. So videos help to quickly hone in on the issue and resolve it. If you look at the bottom right of the graph, it says video GPS year to date. Those are just three of the things that we deal with when we get customer feedback. And so we've gotten, for example, this school year, 139 concerns from the public, and the videos were able to help us in terms of our investigation, where 99 of those complaints were really not corroborated. The video showed something totally different. 40 were, and of course we take, whether it's corrective action or retrain or whatever else we need to do. So it's a great investment. It's like having, another supervisor or a few supervisors out there to help us with. In terms of idling in telematics, so the graph up on the right-hand side, that shows where most of the idling is happening. About 65% of the idling is occurring in the bus compound. And obviously, as you look at every month, it goes up as the weather gets colder. We're also, since 2010, when technology changed on the engines and they went to the selective catalyst, those buses have to regenerate to keep the exhaust system clean, if you will. And we have to park them and do park regeneration, sometimes up to 45 minutes at high RPM. So part of all that comes into play. The rest of the idling takes place, 18% to 16%, almost about even, either off campus or on campus, and that makes sense in terms of some of our smaller buses that got some kids you're required to maintain a specific temperature, especially children with special needs, be it summertime, wintertime, whatever the case might be. So GPS is helping us maintain that, and our transportation staff is pretty good at making sure they're abiding by the state law on that. And you can see what the yearly idle cost to the bottom left that we've been tracking since we equipped all our vehicles with the GPS technology. And if you look at the cost and then you look at the mean average temperature for every month for each school year, you will see that it's actually tracking right along with that mean average temperature. So temperature does have a play to do with that. And just right quick on telematics, they've helped us where we're able to see technical issues when they're small before they create a large problem. I'll give you a quick example. So telematics, they have shown us where fuel injectors were misfiring, which when they misfire, they allow raw fuel to go into the engine, which ends up hurting the engine, which may end up causing an engine to be rebuilt, and that's very expensive. We were doing that a lot prior to the telematics being installed. Now, we haven't done an engine rebuild in about 2 years. So it's working out pretty good. And, there's other great uses that we get out of those telematics. So with that, any questions?
Go ahead, you have a question.
When Council asked about the fuel transportation system has tested that, whether they've actually put this thing, put them online and what their experiences with it?
Not to my knowledge, no, no. But I can look into that for you.
It's not a question, I just wanted to say what outstanding job you and your team do, and under your leadership, we've seen such significant positive changes, from safety to how we monitor to professional development, and I just wanted to recognize you for that. And that's, and even more so in recent months because of the weather. I know that's a tough job, and you're up as early as he is, as Dr. Robinson, if not earlier, determining because of the safety of our students and what's the best, and also for the safety of our staff. So I know it's been a exhausting season for you guys, so to recognize you for that. And this is coming from someone who's a daughter of a former transportation director of a specialized transportation department. So I know it's not an easy job, and you certainly do it with much professionalism and pride.
Thank you, and I'm proud to be part of the team. This is a great school district, great department. There's a lot of great people in that department, and I'm proud to have the opportunity to lead them. So thank you very much for your kind words. All right,
Good
thank
job,
you.
Al.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
So we're going to move on, we've got two action items tonight. Carmen's here to talk about approval of the 2018-2019 school calendar. There was an open issue, right? Any resolution?
Oh, it's still there?
We're still.
So we've adopted, and if it changes, we'll make modifications.
Wow.
So can I have a motion to move forward on the proposed school calendar for next year? Bob? Naomi? All those in favor?
Thank you.
And we have staffing recommendations from Jill. Why don't you give us those, and then we'll get a motion?
Thank you for having staffing on this evening's board agenda. We have one recommendation, Lisa Young for new academic administrator for special education, replacing Sarah Johnson, who will be moving to a different opportunity in another school district. The start date for Lisa would be April 11th. She currently is a CSE chairman at Niskayuna and comes to us with many years of experience in special education. And she's here this evening. Yes, so Lisa's. Oh, sorry.
Before you leave, we'll play a little. Could we have a motion on the staffing recommendations? Christina, second. Bob? All those in favor? Motion carries.
Thank you. Lisa, you want to come up for me?
You're welcome.
Lisa's also a parent.
To avoid the bridge, right, that's been
Yeah,
divided.
yeah.
Oh, it's great now, this is.
Lisa's a parent in the district, and she was at the chorus concert earlier this evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Thanks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that brings us to the end of the meeting. Before we adjourn, I just want to point out we have a meeting in 2 weeks, again, to deal with study session on budget language and talking about that, and then our adoption of the budget will be April 10th. To mention one other thing, we are still, we are targeting holding the community forum on security and safety for Thursday,
April 19th.
We're a little up in the air as to when that might start, whether it might be a 6:30 or 7 o'clock start, in part because we're trying to work with the administration in terms of student participation, whether we have that, they're involved with that session, or we do something before that. So we're flexible on that. I'm hearing a lot of interest from people in this subject. I bet you are as well. And some of it's positive, and some, everybody has a strong opinion on this. And I think part of the goal that we have that night is, one, to provide information prior to that, and then to have a discussion, an open discussion on this, because this is important. When I looked at the budget, I was glad you mentioned that you were recommending additional funds without being specific on the security side. And I was going to ask the question, well, do you think we should at this point make it 250,000? I think we have 160. But then in the continuation, it's actually 300,000 that we have. So we're setting ourselves up for what we're going to need as we decide, as we discuss and bring in some more experts. So anyway, with that, could I have a motion for adjournment? Yeah, you look happy to make it. Second, Bob. All those in favor? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Nice job, thank you.
You weren't out tonight.